how do the Republicans move forward without Pumpkin Tits as their squatter? But basically, they have to ditch magical thinking and start telling the truth. But I wouldn't expect a Republican to tell the truth anyway, because that's all they ever do is fucking lie. But on the hand, but on the one hand, you could judge American democracy to be quite healthy. In November, we had our highest election turnout in over a century, and engaged citizenry, after all, is vital to our system of government. Joe Biden received the most votes of any candidate in U.S. history, and Pumpkin Tits was the second most, basically. On the other hand, you can feel that something is not quite right. Since the insurrection of January 6th, I am catching up to the vast number of people taken in by the outrageous conspiracy theories and by Pumpkin Tits' lie that the election was stolen, which it wasn't. A Quinnipiac survey found that 31% of Americans, including 67% of Republicans and 32% of independents, believe that Biden's win is illegitimate, which it's not. In one way, this is the continuation of a trend that began in 2000, when a great many Democrats refused to accept the legitimacy of George W. Bush's presidency. The Democratic intransigence continued in 2004, and then it reared up again in 2016 after Pumpkin Tits was elected by the joke of Electoral College. And yet this time is different. The people who think Biden is illegitimate took those views to the next anti-democratic level that was egged on by Pumpkin Tits himself by attacking the U.S. Capitol to try to subvert the Congress from performing its constitutional duties. The mob wanted to hang the vice squatter dumbass Pence, and apparently intimidate and assault, or even worse, members of Congress to force them to change the result of the Electoral College. This escalation represents a serious threat to our democracy, as millions of Americans have concluded that the only legitimate elections are ones in which the preferred candidate prevails. And this is an extremely corrosive and unpatriotic viewpoint. If Joe Biden becomes our president, we're done. Which, no, we're not. None of us will be voting again, Kentuckian John Isaacs told the Courier-Journal last weekend. Isaacs had traveled to Washington on January 6th to be part of the Stop the Steal Klan rally that led to the Capitol violence. He told the newspaper that it was mathematically impossible for Biden to have won. Actually, it's not, because Biden did win, you fucking idiot. With all due respect, this is ridiculous. No American should be so wrapped up in a single politician that they declare that they will never vote again because that person lost. The Republican leaders have a responsibility to tell Mr. Isaacs and those who agree with him to tell the truth to him. The election was won by Biden, fair and square, and they should take stock of who has lied to them during the same period. The high probability of a Pumpkin Tit loss was eminently predictable, even before the pandemic struck last year. In 2 elections, he received a smaller percentage of the vote than Mitt Romney did in 2012. Pumpkin Tits' party was wiped out in the 2018 midterm, and then lost the Senate due to his Georgia sabotage. Pumpkin Tits had a rather low political ceiling to begin with, and it fell dramatically after the event of January 6th. But Republicans have been stricken with the terminal case of magical thinking since 2016, when Pumpkin Tits, against all odds, predictions, and polls, had won the squadroncy by the joke of Electoral College. Among many Republicans, there was a feeling that no matter how bad the polling or the squatter's personal performance, did you watch the first debate, it was a joke, it would all just somehow work for him. It didn't. It turns out magical thinking isn't a good political strategy. Pumpkin Tits tried hard for about 2 weeks of his re-election campaign in late October and made it closer than any polls predicted, but it just wasn't enough. And that's okay, because we are holding another election in 2 years, and another 2 years after that. And this is how we do it. Conservatards can rejoice in some of what Pumpkin Tits did. Lower taxes and scores of the conservative judges, Middle East peace agreements, etc., even as we lament his post-election disgrace and chart a path to national viability. The new president deserves the same loyalty as of Republicans and fellow Americans who believe in the Constitution. But this doesn't mean changing our views or values, or even thinking that a single Biden policy is going to be good for the country. His early moves trouble me greatly, as I fear he cannot say no to the fringe Democratic radicals in his party. But it does mean respecting our system, which produced a legitimate result, and therefore a legitimate president. It means renouncing violence as a replacement for normal democratic engagement, and it means preparing to take our arguments to the American people in the next election instead of taking your vote and going home, or worse. Most Republicans supported Pumpkin Tits, even though he wasn't their first choice in the 2016 primary. They stuck with him through numerous self-defeating and outrageous episodes because they respected the election results even when the Democrats did not. The Republicans hoped he could win a second term and continue to deliver the center-right policy victories, which he didn't really have any victories. But most Republicans did not sign up for the shocking level of pouting, lying, and unconstitutional actions that Pumpkin Tits delivered on his way out. people personally, I personally wasn't creative enough to conjure a scenario in which the squatter of the United States would whip up a violent mob to threaten his own loyal vice squatter in a bid to overturn the election results. Watching Biden take the oath of office Wednesday was a pleasant reminder that our system held, despite the recent assault upon it. And for Republicans, it was a rather unpleasant reminder of what happens when you descend into magical thinking that losing an election is mathematically impossible. But the best path forward for conservators is to unify and rejoice around a system that lets us choose our leaders. Work with President Biden to deliver the coronavirus vaccine while opposing the worst impulses of the Democrats. Focus on our conservative ideas instead of unpredictable personalities, and most of all, tell the fucking truth, and to ourselves and to the American fucking people. But yeah.